Hey everyone, my name is Kayla and this is Dark Tales from the Road. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me today. This is episode 24. Today we are going to be going to Monroe, Connecticut, and if that sounds familiar, it definitely should to all you spooky peeps out there, because we are going to be exploring the Annabelle doll with some information about the Warrens, how they got started, and their most notable cases, so we can get an overall view of everything and not just Annabelle. But I'm very excited about this one. I don't love haunted dolls. I'm not a doll person. I think they're very, very creepy. And so I never want to see Annabelle ever. But I have seen the Conjuring movies. If you guys have seen those, it's based off of the Warrens and Annabelle, and she looks extremely different than she does in the movies. If you've never seen a real life picture of her, I'll post it on my Instagram, but you can also Google it. She's a Raggedy Ann doll. She's not like the porcelain doll in the movies. And I had a Raggedy Ann doll growing up, so that just freaks me out even more. But yeah, I'm so excited about this one because Annabelle has a crazy backstory, and the Warrens also do. If you haven't heard of the Warrens, welcome to the experience of the Warrens, because they're a little off tilt, I think. But I'm so excited to be here with you guys. Still fighting this damn cold. Why am I saying dang? Come on. So stuffy, I still have this stupid cough. It's like your kids bring home these viruses and they're fine for or they're sick for 2 days and then they're fine. And mine is 2 weeks now. And then my husband I woke up to him saying, "Fuck you," at me. I'm like, what in God's name? And he's like, "I don't feel good." That is not me. I'm very diligent about, I've been using essential oils and medicine and, everything you can think of to try to get better. And it's been tough. But, I washed and changed our sheets regularly, especially if I had, woke up really, really bad or something like that. So he can just shut it. He doesn't listen to this, so whatever. But yeah, so still hanging in there. Yesterday I took a nap and it was literally a 5 or 6 hour nap, but it was amazing, and I slept through the night, so my body's dying. So it's been good to know you all. Yep, I'll see you on the other side. Just kidding. Anyways, yeah, not much new here. Just I'm a homebody and I like to sit and work on my podcast, and cleaning comes last, because I hate that. So does cooking. It's just the worst. Anyways, I think that is all that's new with me. I have a very exciting life, I guess. So let's go ahead and just get started. So we are going to, if you're new here, I always talk about history first. Big history buff. I'm obsessed with learning about new things. I am an Aquarius. I am an Enneagram 5, sorry. So if you know anything about that, I love to learn. And so, my husband makes fun of me because I'll be watching a show or something and something odd comes up and I'm like, I don't know what that is. And I'll pick up my phone and instantly research it. And I've even noticed doing my research for these podcasts, I keep going on tangents, and some of it was in this one too, because it's in our next episode, the place we're going to is named after this British French guy, and so I'm like, oh, what does he do? And I clicked on him and I'm like, oh, he did that, and I'm clicking through onto the next thing and stuff. So yeah, I love to learn. So with that, I always start with a little history about the state we're in and the city we're in. And then eventually when I move out of the state, I will do the same thing across the globe, so we can really get to know the history of where we're at and what we're talking about, because a lot of that history really comes into play with the topic, and sometimes it doesn't, but it's kind of nice. We're in Connecticut. Next week we're in Delaware. I know absolutely nothing about Delaware. It's just not that state that's on your radar. So it's been really cool, and I hope you guys enjoy it also. But you can always skip ahead if you're not into history, or you're from Connecticut and you just want to skip over. But even being from Colorado and living in all these different states, I still am learning new things every day. So yeah, if you're new here, that's how it works. So let's get started with Connecticut. That is the state we're in. And so I got some information from a bunch of different places. If you guys ever need to see my sources or want to research more using my sources, they're always in the show notes. So when you click on the episode to listen to it, just go down and you'll see me talk about the episode. You'll see podcasts I like to talk about. I'm not doing another one this week, just kind of taking a break from that. And you'll see where to find me. And then if you keep scrolling, there's all my sources. So I'm trying to be better about talking about them in the podcast instead of just listing them out. So my first information here is from history.com. Best place ever, you guys. And it's just a small snippet, which is nice. Because I'm just trying to do small snippets of these to really give time for the rest of the subject. So Connecticut is one of the original 13 colonies, and it's one of the 6 New England states. So especially if you're not from the United States or the East Coast, which I am not, I honestly did not know what New England was. I thought it was like just Massachusetts or the Boston area. Like, I have no clue, because they're the New England Patriots, and I'm thinking they're in Boston, but New England is made up of 6 different states, just right in that northeastern corner. So, see, learn something new every day. Eli Whitney grew up in Connecticut, and so did Samuel Colt, who, if you don't know who he is, manufactured guns and other firearms. And because of him, Connecticut was actually the leading manufacturer of those for a long time. Hartford is the capital, and it's in the north central part of the state, and it is the 3rd smallest state, but it also ranks among the most densely populated. I would love to go to Connecticut someday. It just sounds cool. And then go to all the little states around it, Connecticut and Rhode Island are 2 of the only states that failed to ratify the 18th Amendment, which prohibited the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol. And there's a man named Nathan Hale. If you have not heard of him, he was a Revolutionary War soldier. He's born in Connecticut, and he was actually a spy. He was hanged by the British in 1776, but he was literally like the state's hero. And they actually named him Connecticut's official state hero in 1985. So he was, a Revolutionary War soldier for the United States, or the colonies at that time, and he was a turncoat, because he would spy on the British, or he would go in wearing a British uniform and find out all that, and then report back to George Washington and all of those guys. I mentioned this before. If you've seen the show on AMC called Turn, he is featured in season 3 of that. And Turn is a lot of the spies at that time who were helping out the Americans against the British. And it's really good. There's one who's a woman, and now I can't remember her name for the life of me, but very, very good show. I really enjoyed it. So some other history, some early history came from the Connecticut government website. It was first explored by the Dutch, and they formed tons of trading posts, and the first permanent settlers there were English Puritans. They were actually from Massachusetts that came into Connecticut, and that was in 1633. So Connecticut was politically very independent. It had proclaimed this in the Fundamental Orders of 1639, which was a democratic government based on the will of the people. And that fundamental order is said to be the first written constitution of the democratic government. And Connecticut got the nickname, quote, the Constitution State because of it. I just thought that was interesting. I am into kind of political and government wise. I'm not a huge political person, so there's a lot listed for Connecticut where I was like, this is gibberish, it's just gibberish, I don't understand. But that one fact kind of stood out to me. So Connecticut and their people were huge in the American Revolution. They brought in soldiers. They, gave up their sweat, their blood, and their wealth. They donated a lot also. And they were on the battlefields from like Quebec, Canada, all the way to the Carolinas. And it was General Israel Putnam at the Battle of Bunker Hill who cried out this famous saying that we all know, quote, don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. And then again, Nathan Hale, the spy, right before he was hanged by the British, he said, quote, I regret that I have but one life to lose for my country. So both very famous quotes from the Revolutionary War in the state of Connecticut. And they were also huge because they supplied and contributed to the army like crazy. And this was due a lot to the governor at the time, Jonathan Trumbull, and he was the only colonial governor to actually support the cause of Americans' independence from Britain. And so George Washington gave Connecticut the name the Provision State. I did find on Wiki, I don't use it a lot, but I do find little snippets here and there that I like. And this is about Yale. So it was a huge deal. It was very much pushed to have this very educational and intellectual college there to be, one of the highest among the area, and all like Harvard and all of those. And some people that went there was like Noah Webster and a lot of writers like Mark Twain. And so Yale is still a huge part of Connecticut and, of those Ivy League schools, as we know. And now Connecticut is really known for their production of jet engines. They do submarines, and they're huge in the advancement of pharmaceuticals. So this takes place in Monroe, Connecticut, and I could find absolutely nothing. I don't know why I struggled with Monroe, but I guess there just wasn't a lot, and so I literally have 2 sentences, and I got it from connecticuthistory.org. It was incorporated in 1823 and named after the then president, James Moore. And the agriculture at that time really made up the economy for Monroe, but then in the 19th century it became a transportation hub for a lot of the travelers that were going in between, Danbury, Bridgeport, and especially New York. So that is Monroe. Sorry. So we're going to jump right into Annabelle. I have a lot of information, and of course I have a Ghost Adventures episode, and I found 2 other Sorry, I can't stop moving when I record. I have one hand in my pocket, but my other one is going crazy. So, yes, here's some information I got from Wikipedia, Haunted Rooms UK, and thelineup.com. So, if you haven't heard of Annabelle, she is a Raggedy Ann doll that's allegedly haunted, and now it resides in the Occult Museum by Ed and Lorraine Warren. They have a paranormal museum, and they were paranormal investigators. Annabelle was moved there in the 1970s after hauntings started happening and they were asked to intervene. So, according to the Warrens, there was a student nurse. She was given the doll in 1970, and I'll go further into this also. But they claim the doll behaved strangely. They brought in a medium, and they were told the doll had a spirit of a deceased girl named Annabelle. And they tried to, the roommate and the nurse just tried to, accept it. And they were super sweet to it and, didn't provoke it, nothing like that. But the doll eventually started becoming malicious and very frightening. And so then at that point, the Warrens were contacted and they moved the doll to their museum after pronouncing that it was possessed by a demon. And it remains at their museum in Monroe, but the museum is not open. I don't know what is going on. I don't know if COVID played a huge role in that or not, but right now it is not open. And some more information from Haunted Rooms UK. So the real Annabelle was given to this woman named Donna. She was a student nurse, and it was a birthday gift from her mother. And a thing to remember about this is Annabelle was bought from a secondhand store, like a thrift store. So it's not like her mom made this. And Donna was living with a roommate. Her name was Angie. And at first, she loved the gift. Of course, it's a gift from, your parent and you cherish it. But the girls really started to fear this doll. Annabelle would start making small movements, which Donnie and Angie thought maybe they accidentally moved her, or, they did something to cause her to move. I guess at one point she had ended up on the floor from the chair that she was sitting in. So, nothing too bad. And, thinking maybe she just fell off the chair. But then the movements really started to keep going, and she started moving more. An example, they said, quote, she may have ended up on the couch instead of on Donna's bed or outside Angie's door immediately after she returned to Donna's room. So those are alarming. I would not be a fan of those. So a close friend of theirs, Lou, he really did not like this doll. He got very nervous around it. He really believed that the doll was evil and possessed and just insistent to Donna and Angie that they needed to do something. So Donna and Angie had very progressive views, and they still were like, no, it's nothing. I bet it was just us that accidentally moved the doll and forgot. But things started really escalating. The girls started finding notes around their apartment, and the notes were actually written on parchment paper. And the girls said that they have never used parchment paper before. They don't have any in their apartment. So that's like, what? And it had and it varied in what it said. There were things like it would say, quote, help Lou, or quote, help us. So I don't think the doll liked Lou very much. And kind of the last straw for them was that the doll was found with blood on her hands. Donna had come home from work and found the doll in her usual spot on Donna's bed. but she had literal blood on her hands. And it's, people speculate it was blood or just red liquid, but it's like it was coming from the doll. And so that was the last straw. The girls called in a medium to really help find out what was going on with the doll before things continued to escalate. So the first medium they called sat down with Donna and Angie and Annabelle. And what this medium says was that the land that their apartment complex was built on used to be just a field. And a young girl around 7 years old was found dead in there many years before. So when this doll came into their apartment, Annabelle's spirit was still roaming around, and Annabelle found the doll, and her spirit went into that doll. And so it was that, Annabelle became Annabelle the doll, which became Annabelle the haunted doll. But they were very loving and giving, but they felt sorry for the poor girl, for her being found dead in this field. And they had decided that they wanted the doll to stay in there because they didn't want this little girl to be left alone. So sweet. Nowadays, even a doll, I'm like, ew, no, get that doll away from me. Quick story. We went to an estate sale, and it was very weird estate sale. And they were like, go in the house and walk around and just whatever you want, just grab it. So we're going, and this is the very, very weird house, very hoarder house. And I go into the furthest back room, and there's a computer chair with the creepiest doll on it. And I immediately turned around and I was like, get out of this house. And my husband and kids are like, what? And I'm like, no, that's a bad omen. We gotta get out of here. And it was just instant. I couldn't even. No dolls. Being Bagel Bites, we don't like dolls. I will cover the Island of Dolls at one point because it's so freaky. Anyway, so let's bring in Lou, their good friend. He was actually attacked by Annabelle before the Warrens were called in. She did not like him. Or they believe maybe the little girl is reminded of men in her life, or maybe she was killed by a man. But Lou knew something was wrong, and Annabelle did not like him for it. And he would get very bad dreams and visions of Annabelle. But Lou was actually attacked by Annabelle, and that is really what pushed Donna and Angie to call the Warrens when it started getting physical. Angie and Lou were together hanging out, and they heard some movement in Donna's room, but Donna wasn't there. So they were freaked, just frozen, and they were concerned that it was an intruder. They didn't know what to do. But then they realized that the movement was Annabelle. So Lou looked inside Donna's room, and there's no one there, but the doll was sitting on a chair instead of on the bed where she usually is. So he moved towards Annabelle, and this feeling kept getting worse and worse the closer he got to her. He was so creeped out, and it's just that feeling you get when something's wrong. Something is very, very wrong. All of a sudden, he started to have this pain in his chest and realized that there were claw marks across his chest. And it's like someone had leapt at him and scratched him, like that pain in his chest. And again, no one was in the room. And so, the marks had to come from Annabelle. What else would have done that? And, 3 scratches. We all know, if, you watch Ghost Adventures and all that, 3 scratches is a demonic entity. But then what was weird is he said that they had healed right away, just in a day or two, with no traces of them at all. So the Warrens were called. And the Warrens brought a priest with them, and they discovered or speculated that Annabelle's main goal was to possess Donna. Annabelle was a real and significant demon, and that she was very much attached to this doll, but she wanted Donna. And the Warrens said that demons, they don't really possess items or things, but they possess people. So that's why they feel like Annabelle stuck onto this doll to get to Donna or someone else, you know? And they say that, but like there's tons of haunted dolls out there, like Robert the doll, Peggy the doll, and there's tons more. And I hope to cover those too. And that's why We Drink refuses to say Peggy's name, but I will not let her dictate that. Peggy the doll, okay? I will cover you someday. Anyways, so the priest went through and did an exorcism of the apartment, and the Warrens took Annabelle with them. While they were driving home, they agreed that it would be best to take the back roads. They were really worried that if they were on the main highways, that Annabelle would find a way to cause an accident. But, sure enough, there were car problems the whole way home. Power steering failed, the brakes failed, and the engine kept stalling. So, allegedly, if that did all happen, thank you, Warrens, for not going on the highway, because who knows how much worse it could have been with other cars around, And it stopped for a while because Ed turned around and sprinkled Annabelle with holy water. So they finally got home, and Ed put the doll on his desk, thinking she'll be fine for a little while. No, come on. And then Annabelle really showed them what she was made of, Annabelle was seen by the Warrens rising above the desk, literally levitating on multiple occasions, not just like after he put her on his desk. And so the activity slowed down, and then it stopped, and they were like, this demon's very quiet. But then it started up again. She was found in different rooms of the house. They found her moving around. They would put her in one place and she'd be in another place. So Ed and Lorraine called the priest again, but he was not taking it seriously. And the priest said to Annabelle that, you can't hurt me. You're just a doll. But it turns out that was a very big mistake, and he should not have said that, because he was later in a car accident on the way home. The car flipped over, brakes failed, and it was completely totaled. The priest was hurt very badly, but he did survive. So Annabelle is still around today. She is in a locked case glass that the Warrens had built to keep her from getting free and roaming the house. There's actually a huge sign that says "Do not touch," as well as a cross. And some say that they see Annabelle moving around in the case, just waiting to get free. Like, ugh. So I'm going to go back a little bit and talk about Ed and Lorraine. They are very well known in the paranormal society, but I know there's a lot of people that have probably never heard about them. So I got some information from Wiki, of course. The lineup.com also had a ton of information about them. So Ed Warren, he was born in 1926. He passed away in 2006. And Lorraine Warren, born in 1927, she passed away in 2019. They are paranormal investigators, and they are very much associated with a lot of prominent hauntings. Edward is self-taught and self-claimed to be this demonologist, and he authored a bunch of books, and he would tour around giving lectures. And then Lorraine claimed to be a clairvoyant and a medium, and so they would work together. If you've seen The Conjuring, then that also gives you an idea of what they were like. So they met in 1944 when they were just teenagers, and Ed was working as an usher at a theater in Connecticut, and Lorraine, always went to this theater. And then in 1945, Ed went into the Navy and was aboard a ship that actually sunk. And so he got to return home on a 30-day survivor's leave, and that's when he and Lorraine got married. And then in 1951, they had a daughter named Judy. The next year, in 1952, they founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, and it is one of the oldest ghost hunting groups in New England. I don't know if it's still active, but I would say it probably is it. And Ed, he was like an amateur artist. He liked to paint. He would actually go around to haunted houses and, sketch or paint the exterior of the house, and then would give it to the homeowners to kind of get his foot in the door into these haunted houses. And so after Annabelle, they had a lot of high profile investigations. So I want to kind of go through those because you've probably heard of them, not knowing that the Warrens were involved. So the big one after Annabelle was the Perron family in 1971, and the Warrens had claimed that it was cursed by a witch named Bathsheba Sherman, and this is actually what formed the basis of the first Conjuring franchise. So Roger and Carolyn Perron, they moved their family, they had 5 daughters, into this 200-acre home in Harrisville, Rhode Island, and they did not know about the former resident and what had happened in that house. This house was built in 1736. It was a country home where Bathsheba Thayer and her 4 children lived. 3 of them died very young, and during that time it was not uncommon because there was a really high infant mortality rate, but the deaths of those 3 children and the circumstances around them really created some suspicion within the town. And so the town labeled her a Satanist. She allegedly then hanged herself in her backyard. So the Perron family move in, and they start having ghostly interactions, but they describe them as pleasant, like the spirits were playing with the children or actually helping to do chores. That would be so nice. Please, ghosts of my house, can you go do the laundry in the kitchen real quick? Hello? Anyone? No, my home's too new, I think. Sorry, that was so random, but I love it. But then eventually some dark interactions really started, like Bathsheba's ghost. And she was a very menacing presence to this home. They would hear disembodied voices, furniture would move on its own, and full appearances would start with these ghosts and showing themselves to the family. So Carolyn was allegedly one of Bathsheba's consistent targets. I guess she was very jealous of the woman's role as both the mother and the wife. And so Bathsheba would pinch and slap Carolyn a lot. And she would even touch Roger, her husband, very inappropriately. Calm down there, Bathsheba. And then the Warrens came in 1974, but their presence there was not welcomed by the ghosts. It majorly aggravated it and made conditions worse. Bathsheba's ghost allegedly tortured the family so much that the family got to a point where they were asking them to leave. And this was the personal experience in the box office hit The Conjuring. But I know a lot of us have seen this movie. This was also a huge, notorious case for the Warrens, and that was with the Lutz family in Amityville. And it's obviously best-selling book, and it turned into a movie series with Ryan Reynolds, when you're like standing by the lake with no shirt on. Yes. So Amityville Horror really put the Warrens into play, and they became famous, especially within the paranormal societies. They weren't actually included in the book or the movie, but that's because there were so many investigators that had come in that were involved in this case. So yeah, that's what I read is why. So this is kind of what happened in Amityville. So it's, again, one of their most famous investigations, and it involved the Lutz family, and they moved into a Dutch colonial house in Amityville, Long Island in 1975. But going back to a year before they moved in, it was a site of a deadly mass murder when Ronald Defoe Jr. killed 6 members of his family. And so the Lutz family moved in, and they lived there for 28 days with their 3 children. And while they were there, they reported extremely aggressive voices, swarms of flies, welts, family members levitating, banging noises, and entities. So Ed and Lorraine were called in to cleanse the house, and they brought a TV crew with them. And they were snapping photos, and there's one that's very famous, and it's featuring a boy with glowing eyes. And I can put this up on the Instagram too. It's very famous, and they just knew that this land was cursed. So in 2013, they did an interview with Yahoo, and Lorraine said that Amityville House, quote, was the one case that haunts her the most. Amityville was horrible, she said during the press conference for the Conjuring movie. She said, quote, it was absolutely horrible. It followed us straight across the country. I will never go in the Amityville house ever again. That's a lot, especially for them. They've seen some pretty horrible things, but when the entities start following you home, guys, and I'm going to go over the ghost adventures, and Zak potentially had the same kind of thing happen. So another huge one for them were the trial of Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, and Ed and Lorraine were called to testify on behalf of Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, and it was the first case in the U.S. to use, quote, the devil made me do it defense. So on the evening of February 16th of 1981, 19-year-old Johnson was out for dinner, came back, and his landlord, Alan Bono, and some others came around. He stabbed Bono multiple times using a pocket knife, and then Johnson pleaded not guilty by possession. And he blamed this on Johnson's relationship with his fiance's younger brother, David. Weird, I'll get to it, just keep holding on. So in 1980, David woke up to, as he described, quote, a man with big black eyes, thin face with animal features and jagged teeth, pointed ears, horns, and hooves. So it mirrors the creature that was in the movie Insidious, and it scared David so much that he turned to Debbie and Arnie for help. And Arnie Johnson could not figure out what happened to David. He was covered in bruises and scratches, so they brought in a priest, and this just angered that entity even more, and David would actually start hissing and speaking in multiple voices, And so, again, the Warrens were brought in, and in an interview in People magazine, Lorraine said, quote, "While Ed interviewed the boy, I saw a black misty form next to him, which told me we were dealing with something of a negative nature. Soon the child was complaining that invisible hands were choking him, and there were red marks on him. He said that he had the feeling of being hit." So the Warrens worked with the town of Bridgeport and 4 other priests to exorcise what they say were more than 40 demons living inside David. And through this, allegedly, they saw that David had returned to normal. But Arnie Johnson allegedly had become the new target. He moved in with his fiancee Debbie, and they had gone to a bar with their landlord, Bono. I didn't explain it right the first time. I'm sorry, my notes were a little off, but now I'm in the correct right. And a fight broke out between them, the landlord and Johnson, and he stabbed Bono. And but Johnson's defense didn't hold up in court. He was found guilty of first-degree manslaughter, and he only served 5 years of his sentence, which was actually, it doesn't say how many years, it just says initially longer sentence. So that was another case that they were involved with, and I have 2 more, sorry. This one's short. So this, in 1986, a couple, Carmen and Al Snedeker, they were renting a house in Southington, Connecticut, because their son was in the hospital receiving treatments and they wanted to be closer to him. But the family, again, had no knowledge about where they were living and its past. And it used to be a funeral home. That just gets me chills. I'm not into that. And it had, remnants of the mortuary still in the basement and a graveyard outside. So when they moved in, their older son began seeing visions of ghosts and super terrifying. And so they actually uncovered toe tags in the house. Toe tags would be left in the house regularly. No, thank you. The lights would flicker, dishes would shake, and the smell of decaying flesh was all around them. I have the craziest sense of smell. And so any little thing, and if I can't imagine overcoming that smell. I'd be like, we got to get out of this house. No. And then, oh gosh. And then, allegedly the water would turn blood red sometimes. And Carmen and Al actually, alleged that the demons had sodomized them during the 2 years that they lived there. They eventually asked Ed and Lorraine for help, and they attributed the hauntings to the people who were brought to the funeral home. And the Warrens believed that the morticians actually partook in some very unsavory activities with the dead bodies, if you get where I'm going. So yeah, they lived there for 2 years. They moved out, and again, this was immortalized in film again, And the last one that the Warrens are really known for, it's a very unusual case for them to be on. And actually, the Warrens left the U.S. and went to Essex, England, and there was the man named Bill Ramsey, who believed that he was possessed by a demon that manifested as a wolf. He said he had a great upbringing, but one day, around when he was 9, he started to exhibit very inhuman qualities. So he said while playing outside, he felt this just frigid cold overtake him, and this, awful smell came over also, and he just flew into a rage. He supposedly uprooted a fence post with the fence still attached, and then was gnawing on wire mesh. Obviously, he grew up and he became a husband and a father, and he hadn't had an incident since the 1960s. But then early on in his marriage, he started to have some massive nightmares, cold sweats, and waking up hearing the pants of wild animal, like panting. Pants and panting, it sounds like pants and panties, and it's throwing me off right now, but like a dog panting. And then he realized that the panting was coming from him. So in the 1980s, he was repeatedly, this was happening. And he would get the same sensations he had while he was a child. And then at one point, he actually attacked one of his friends in the car on the way to a pub, and attacked a police officer in an altercation. And that actually happened multiple times. So when he was in his way and the police intervened, he would actually get in altercations with the police. So Ramsey was in the hospital quite a few times, and it was all the same symptoms, rage, inhuman strength. He would bare his teeth, growling, hunched shoulders, and his hands curled like claws. And when the Warrens were interviewed about their experience with Ramsey, they said that, quote, Ramsey would ask to be locked up in a jail cell for his protection and the protection of the public. And when the Warrens actually heard of Ramsey, they had them come to Connecticut, where they recorded an exorcism with a bishop on Ramsey. So it was known as the South End Werewolf, and that's a big case that they were involved in also. They have authored many books about paranormal and their investigations, and they claim to have investigated well over 10,000 cases in their career. After Ed passed away, Lorraine ran their occult museum, and it's in the back of their house in Connecticut. And then her son-in-law, Tony Speara, helps her to run it. She has since passed in 2019. But it displays many haunted objects and artifacts that they have discovered all over the world. And some are very famous from their investigations. And so now it's owned by her daughter and son-in-law, Judy Warren and Tony Speara. So I have a little information about the museum where Annabelle lives. Ed really attached to his son-in-law, Tony, and he really believed that he was his demonology protege, is how he said it, and really trusted him with his work and caring for all the artifacts in their museum. And most of them are in protective cases. And Tony really makes sure to caution visitors, especially about Annabelle's powers. So this was when it was open, obviously. And Speara believes that Annabelle is the most dangerous object in the museum. But there have been a lot of claims that the Warrens are not truthful. They've definitely become household names because of Amityville Horror and The Conjuring. But there's so many people that have looked into them, that they have found that a lot of their stories can be debunked. The New England Skeptical Society, awesome, proved that a lot of the artifacts in there were fraudulent and doctored photos and just exaggerated storytelling. But there's a lot that still doubt Annabelle's powers, and Tony attributes to playing disturbing Russian roulette. There might be one bullet left, quote, there might be one bullet in the gun, but would you still pull the trigger, or would you just put the gun down and not take the risk? In August of 2020, there were some real life fears going around about Annabelle because it reportedly she had escaped from the museum, which was closed. I guess they're having zoning issues in 2018. And the rumors went crazy on social media, but they were outed. It was not accurate. That did not happen. And Tony actually made a video of himself with Annabelle in the museum, saying that Annabelle's alive, but she's still here in her museum, in her box. So I want to go over some skeptics. I got most of these on Wiki. There wasn't a ton from other sources, but I liked what they had to say, and there were, So there's a Texas State University professor of religious studies. His name is Joseph Laycock. He is very skeptical of the Warrens Museum. He calls it full of off-the-shelf Halloween junk, dolls, and toys, books you could buy at any bookstore. He calls the Annabelle legend, quote, interesting case study in the relationship between pop culture and the paranormal folklore. He says that the demonic doll has just been popularized by films like Child's Play with Chucky, Dolly Dearest, The Conjuring, and likely came about because of the early legends around Robert the Doll, and I guess the Twilight Zone released an episode 5 years prior to the Warrens, and it was titled Living Doll, in which the character of the mother is named Annabelle. So, yeah. And he suggests that, quote, the idea of demonically possessed dolls allows modern demonologists to find supernatural evil in the most banal and domestic of places. Yeah. And a writer named Sharon Hill, she commented publicly about the Warren Museum coinciding with the film release of The Conjuring. And she said that many of the myths and legends have, quote, seemingly been of their own doing, and that people may have difficulty separating the Warrens from their Hollywood portrayal. She criticized the press coverage of the museum and Annabelle. She said, quote, like real life Ed Warren, real life Annabelle is actually far less impressive. She also said, we have nothing but Ed's word for this, and also for the history and origins of the objects in the museum. In 1997, there was an interview in the Connecticut Post where Steve Novella and Perry DeAngelis, they actually investigated the Warrens, a part of the New England Skeptical Society. And they found that they were very sweet people, very pleasant, but their claims of demons and ghosts, quote, at best as tellers of meaningless ghost stories and at worst dangerous frauds. It was a $13 tour that they took, and they looked at all of the evidence that they had for different spirits and ghosts, and they watched the videos, and their conclusion was, quote, it's all baloney. They found errors with the flash photography and nothing evil in the artifacts that they collected. They said, quote, they have a ton of fish stories and evidence that got away. They're not doing scientific investigation. They have a predetermined conclusion about which they adhere to literally and religiously. And Lorraine actually commented on that, saying that the problem with them was that, quote, they don't base anything on God. And so then Novella came back and said, quote, it takes work to do solid critical thinking, to actually employ their intellectual facilities and come to a conclusion that actually reflects reality. That's what scientists do every day, and that's what skeptics advocate. So the Warrens, they don't want to cause harm to anyone. They make sure to caution people about things in their museum and all of that. But you also have to take it with a grain of salt and caution yourself on the claims that they have. And people have described the Warrens having delusions, and they just do it to confuse the public and are not really legitimately using the scientific method. So that's what I have about Annabelle, about the Warrens. I hope that was good. But yeah, I'm very back and forth. I believe in the ghostly and the haunted and demonic and all that, but I think I've always had this weird thing with the Warrens. And I've seen the Conjuring movies. I think they're really good, but I don't know. I'm very back and forth. I do think that some of it is probably not real and made up. I'm unsure about Annabelle, but like Peggy and Robert, I'm still into the, like, I think things can hold a lot. And so I disagree when they said that they don't possess objects, they possess people. I agree with that, but I think objects hold a lot. And so I'm unsure about Annabelle. I couldn't find a lot about Donna and Angie. Where are they? Are they still affected? Things like that. So, real quick, what's my time at? Oh my, I'm so sorry if this is over. Hopefully my editing brings it down. So real quick, I just want to go over the Ghost Adventures episode that I saw. It was season 19, episode 8, called Annabelle's Curse. And so Annabelle has never been allowed to be investigated on a TV show. And so Tony Speara, the son-in-law, actually is involved. He brought Annabelle to Zak's Las Vegas museum to investigate her. So he brought holy water, just as protection, on standby. And when, he's bringing Annabelle in and sets her down, Zak is overcome with just massive confusion. He's very disoriented, having trouble speaking, and he's asking Tony about it, and Tony's like, this is totally normal. And Annabelle doesn't want to do this, is what he's saying. Zak is like hit in the center of his chest with something, and it happened to be as he was walking in to meet Annabelle. So at first they put Annabelle in, it looks like a closet. It's not a very big room, but it has dolls from head to toe. And Zak hates dolls, and it's just a very weird spot. It's not a huge spot. So I'm like, the whole time I'm like, oh my God, you're going to touch her. You're going to touch her. Stop. And yeah, So she's not in that room yet. Sorry. I just went ahead and I'm like, oh crap. But, he's still seeing Annabelle. He pulls Annabelle out of this like chest or briefcase type thing. So they're getting things set up, and Mike, who's the audio tech, was talking with Tony, and this very weird whining voice started to come through on the audio. It was very, very creepy, and things just start getting stranger as it's going along. And Tony says, I think she's ready to have some fun. Like, come on, Tony, no. So Tony's getting ready to take her out of this briefcase thing, and he soaks his hands in holy water. He says prayers around her, and he puts on these huge thick gloves. And Zak is actually watching this, and he's very skeptical about it. He's like, wow, this is like a lot for a Raggedy Ann doll, and he takes her out. He's got these big old gloves on and sets her on a chair in this weird doll room. So before Zak goes in, he does the holy water and does the Trinity on himself, and then he goes into the room. And it is reiterated Lord, thousands of times in this episode for Zak, to not touch her. Do not touch her. And Tony's telling him, you know, if you touch her, you are literally opening a door to another realm. And you can never close it. And then, of course, Zak's reaction is, but I just want to creak it open. You know, of course, he just wants to creak it open. Tony says he has to watch the investigation the entire time to make sure that they do not touch her. So, again, it's in this weird doll room, and when they're walking, on their right is a fortune teller machine, and it's Zak as the fortune teller, and he uses it later on in the show, because the first part is Annabelle, and then the second part, 3 people get to come in. They were like chosen for something to come in and investigate his Vegas museum. And so that he uses the fortune teller to like talk to them and say, okay, go, you know. But so they're going towards the room, and his fortune teller, you know, right next to them starts flashing lights. So they get down there and they unplug the machine. They have like the some sort of technology that says the word. You know what I mean. And all of a sudden it comes through, it says electricity. And so Zak was like, this thing doesn't just work on its own. Like, you have to put a quarter in it for it to work. And so like Zak can record something, and then the people have to put a quarter in, and then it talks. And so like they're standing there and they're just like overwhelmed with this strong energy. And then the camera catches like an anomaly right next to Annabelle. And so they are like ready. Something's crazy. Something's going on. It's time to interact. And so they're sitting in this room, and Zak's on one side and Aaron's on the other. And again, I'm like freaking out because it's such a small room where I'm like, don't touch her, don't touch her. So Zak's talking in there with Annabelle, and they heard something through the audio. Couldn't quite tell what it was. So again, Aaron goes in with them, and it is pitch black in this room. Like they can't even see where Annabelle is. So that's also why I was freaking out. But they feel just massive amounts of energy in there, and just fear, just covered in fear. And they said that a lot of this fear was created by the Warrens, because of, you know, the name and the movies. And so they put a spirit box underneath the doll, and it came across that said, listen. And so they were like, who do we listen to? And it said, Annabelle. Like, I got chills, and then I was like, don't touch her, just get out of that room. The room is so creepy. So they actually decided to move her so they could see her better, put more camera and tech on her. And so they have her sitting in a chair in this bigger room, and, you know, everyone's surrounding her with all this technology. And so Zak's like, what do you want, Annabelle? And she comes back and says, you. And he says, you want me, Annabelle? And then she says, us. So Zak continues asking questions, and he keeps getting closer to Annabelle. And then Aaron hears a loud growl. And then they have that camera. Sorry, I need to adjust. They have that camera where it does like the stick figures when it can detect something. And so you can see Zak's stick figure, and they see a figure on Zak. Like there's Zak figure and one on the back. And so they're watching this figure, and it goes to Annabelle, and then it goes back to Zak, and then it comes around again and goes back to Annabelle, and then it's like hovering around, and then it goes back to Zak. So Zak's feeling all this energy, and he's zoning out. And then he's kept saying, I feel really connected and very protective of her. And he's like, I just want to touch her so bad. And everyone Tony at the time is in like the command room, so not in the room with Annabelle, but he can speak through the speakers in the museum to Zak. I don't know why Tony didn't just stay in the room. Sometimes I think it's a little bit of a setup that they did, but this is just what's happening. And so everyone in there is insisting to him, don't touch it. And he says, Annabelle's really enticing. Oh, Tony comes over the speaker and says that, hey, it's just Annabelle enticing you in and trying to let the evil in. Don't touch her. And so Billy is filming and he's like, God, I'm burning up. Just all of a sudden, I'm soaked in sweat. I feel so hot. And they're saying, okay, we need to put her back in the doll case. And then Annabelle says, Anne. So Zak, again, is so insistent. He just wants to touch it so bad. And Zak seems very different, very out of it, not listening to anybody, just so zoned in on what's happening and wanting to touch her. And Tony, comes across and is like, Zak, don't. And Tony's telling him, say a prayer. Here, repeat what I'm saying. And Zak won't do it. And then a voice comes over that says, God. So Zak is still getting this just insatiable urge to touch Annabelle. And and Annabelle commands him over this voice thing and says, grab. And then says, foot. And Zak says he feels like goodness and he feels happiness and sadness. It was very weird how he's describing it. He's like, but I don't feel evil. And he's like, it's inside of him. Like everyone's saying, it is inside of him. And so they're all kind of moving around and Zak is on the floor kneeling next to her and he just goes over and touches her foot. And he denies it, but they have a thermal camera going and you can see Zak's fingerprints, like his hand, on the foot. So obviously he touched her and you can see it in the footage. But Tony freaks out. He comes in just yelling at Zak that he's, in spiritual danger. Get away. He is angry. He's so mad at Zak and he removes Annabelle, puts her back. So Zak comes to and is talking and he's, confesses he touched her foot. He said he felt this very weird connection that she told him to do it, that he does not remember, but he thinks he did it. And, he's telling Tony, I'm so sorry. I mean, no disrespect. How do I reverse it? What do I do? So Billy kind of stops everyone. And, that figure came back and it's double. There's now two of them in Zak. And, he's talking to Tony about being so confused and then it leaves his body. Then shows up behind and then disappears. And so Zak is freaked and he's like, I think she's running free in my museum. Which I was not expecting him to say that. So I was like, holy shit, what? And so he's asking, will it return to the doll before you leave, Tony? Or is she just going to follow? What if Annabelle stays? And Zak's freaking out. And, it's not a good situation. And over the camera, you can hear what comes through and it says Jesus. And Zak all of a sudden is getting extremely affected again, having very violent thoughts about hurting other people, about hurting himself. Very bad. So Annabelle gets put back and Tony leaves. They're done for the night. And so we've never seen him do this, and he's recording, and he arrives at his house, pulls in his driveway, and the odometer reads 666. 6666. 4 6s. And then he goes the next day to lunch with a friend the next day, and he's eating outside, and there's this freak thunderstorm. He was like, it was perfect outside, you're in Vegas and just freak thunderstorm. It's insane. Just pouring. There's lightning everywhere. And a lightning actually struck the pole right next to his car. So his car was not damaged, but the pole, you could see on it where it had been struck by lightning. And he was like, is this a warning from Annabelle? So later on in that episode, again, like I said, they brought 3 fans to come in. And it was very weird because it was literally right after they talked about Annabelle or had Annabelle there. So these poor people, and they're hearing voices. The girl is struggling emotionally. She's so up and down, and she's like, this is just affecting me so much. They were looking in a mirror, and I can't remember the name of the mirror, but they have curtains over it, and then you open it, and you're supposed to see all this stuff, and they're seeing crazy things. Their moods are changing. It was just insane. And so Zak and the other guys kind of start investigating with her, and there was some stuff happening, but I think what stuck out to me the most was all of a sudden, like they have a carnival room that they had put balloons in. This balloon just appears out of nowhere and is literally following Zak around. So it's not like static or anything, like it's close to him and sticking to him. It was very far away. And so he starts like talking, and he's like, what is this balloon doing here? And then it like rises up, and it's that, balcony staircase where then you look down and it's more staircase, and the balloon just starts going down. Like it was caught, and now it's going to go away. So creepy. I want to go to his museum so bad. If anyone wants to go with me, like, I'm not a huge Vegas person. I don't drink. Almost 2 years sober, guys. It's big freaking deal. But I just want to go to his museum. Madame Tussauds is freaky as hell, so I don't know if I want to go there. But like, no gambling, none of that. I don't care. I'll eat some good food, and I will go to Zak's museum. So if anyone wants to go with me, hit me up, because I'm all in. My husband does not want to go, and I don't have a lot of creepy friends. I know, Mags, I know you probably would go. But yeah, so that is Annabelle and the Warrens and Monroe, Connecticut. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun researching, especially like you see the movies and you know a little bit, but it's kind of cool to dive a little deeper into it. So yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Dark Tales from the Road. I have a Twitter at Dark Tales FTR. I have a TikTok at Dark Tales from the Road. I have a Facebook group, Dark Tales from the Road Podcast. If you would like to support the show, again, my poor baby computer needs to fly to computer heaven. But yeah, and I'm realizing I need some sort of soundproofing in my office. My dogs are kenneled, and because they bark and they're always around me. So hopefully that's another thing that I can do. And yeah, so if you'd like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/darktalesfromtheroad. I have actually had this idea. I want to start bonus episodes reading creepypastas. So if you don't know what creepypasta is, it is a website where people can write stories, and it's fiction, and just people are so freaking creative that I'm like, I would love to showcase some of these people and do that as a bonus episode on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. Because I keep saying I want to do Patreon more, but all I'm really doing is posting episodes, but you get them on Tuesday instead of Wednesday. You get stickers, and then if you are at the highest level, you get merch from me, probably a t-shirt. So yeah, go check that out. Or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/darktales. That is, I post the same exact things from Patreon. It's just which site you would prefer. So yeah, and I'm overwhelmed. My podcast has really taken off, guys, and I can't like freaking believe it. And I'm just so grateful for everything. right now, and it's just so motivating to really keep working hard, put the research in, put the time in to give you guys a quality podcast. Right now, I only have 4 states to go that need to listen to me. Alaska, Hawaii, North Dakota, and Rhode Island. That's all I'm missing. So you guys are freaking awesome. I'm like almost in 50 states. This is ridiculous. And I've been tracking countries too, and I'm in 55 countries. That is what? Like, oh my gosh, you're all listening to me? What is happening? Like, it's very, like, being a stay-at-home mom is hard, especially going from working to not working anymore. I think I really thrived on recognition. And I would work my ass off to make sure, I got that recognition. And so it's hard because you don't get any anymore for what you do. So it's just hearing the kind words, the kind reviews, you got other fellow podcasters. You're so amazing. The support is just unreal. I'm overwhelmed. So thank you everyone all over the world for tuning in. It means so much to me. I hope you guys are enjoying it. And as soon as I cover all 50 states, we're going global, guys. So yeah, and if you guys have a listener story, send them in. My email's darktalesfromtheroad@gmail.com, or DM me or message me on whatever, tweet at me, whatever you guys want to do. Or you want me to cover something in your city, your state, anything like that, or topic suggestions, anything. I would love as much feedback as I can from you guys. So thank you 1,000 times. Thank you 3,000. I love me some Iron Man. But yeah, that's it for today. I'll quit rambling on. I'm starving, like my body is shaking because I'm starving. But anyways, thank you guys. I hope you have an amazing, amazing day, and thank you for all your support. We'll see you next week for episode 25. We're going to be exploring Brunswick Springs in Brunswick, Vermont. Bye.